everybody. Welcome to Maine Wedding Buzz today. Today we're going to be talking about cakes and the icing, the flavors, all that wonderful stuff with Linda from Linda Cakes. Nice to have you here.
Thank you, Fausto.
Let's get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am a hobby decorator. I don't have a storefront, but it is my artistic expression, so I like to work with people to help make their event be more special and help the cake to be a part of that celebration.
So how did you get started in this whole industry of wedding cakes? And and I know you do specialty cakes, so it's not just wedding cakes, but how did you get started in it?
I've decorated cakes for years, but after I had my first experience helping a friend out with a wedding cake, I realized how much of an honor it is to be a part of that day, for them to choose you. They don't get a do-over on their wedding day in most cases, yep. But I realized how much I really liked it and how much more I could express myself and work with the brides. And so it was really in May of 2012 that I decided to step it up and start offering to help brides on a much broader scale.
So do you do any kind of wedding shows? Like I know Portland just had a big wedding show. Do you do any of those to promote the business, and how do you go about getting your clients?
That's a great question. Most of my clients do come from word of mouth because they've been at a wedding where they tasted my cake and saw the creativeness of what I did. I thought about doing a wedding show, but because I don't want to make it a full-time business, I stepped back from that idea, as much as I would love to do it. But I very much want to emotionally feel that cake and to feel what the bride wants, and I can't do that with 3 or 4 cakes a week.
Got it.
So I'm very picky.
So you
about
limit how many you do?
Yes.
Okay. How many do you do in a year? I mean, just out of curiosity.
Some months I don't have any. There are some months that are just not big wedding months. But I would say, last year I did about 10 wedding cakes.
Wow.
In 1 month I had 5 of them. So that was a little too much.
Yeah.
But I'd like to do 2 a month ideally.
So you've created more of a boutique style of doing wedding cakes where you're picking and choosing the clients and they're picking and choosing you.
Very much so.
That makes it a really interesting thing as opposed to just shooting out wedding cakes every weekend. You could take your time on designing that cake. It's a nice approach to it.
Thank you.
I like that. How many, which brings me to a question I was going to ask. Obviously you only make 1 wedding cake in a day then. So if you have a wedding on Saturday, do you sometimes have 2 weddings, or do you sometimes have a wedding on Friday, Saturday, Sunday? How does that work?
I have done a couple of wedding cakes in a weekend. It's a lot of work, and I feel like one of the cakes is going to end up suffering because I want to really be fully involved with the cake that I'm doing, and when you have more than 1 cake, it does detract from the time I could give and focus on 1 cake, so I try not to do that. One weekend I had 2 wedding cakes and 4 graduation cakes, and my husband said, "You're getting out of cakes." It was very brutal. So that's why I'm really picky now about what I take on.
So that brings me to a question that I'm going to throw in there. So when you say you pick and choose wedding cakes, do you also do graduation and baby and birthdays, things of that nature? Do you also limit them as well? So if you take a wedding cake, you don't take a graduation cake, or is it one or the other, or do you do multiples of those?
I will definitely take on the smaller cakes, the graduation cakes, baby cakes, as long as I don't have another commitment.
Perfect.
It took a lot of, it's hard for me to say no,
Mm-hmm.
so it took a lot of stressful weekends for me to come to that. And because I don't do wedding cakes every single weekend, it does open me up to do that. I do have a minimum charge, so when somebody's ordering a graduation or a birthday cake, they might not always be interested in spending that much.
Yep.
But I would definitely give them their money's worth for it. So
Perfect. Now, I know in our world with catering, we have to always do tastings in order to secure your client. Do you do the same thing with wedding cakes? Are there tastings, and do you bring the client to your home, or how does that work?
Funny you should ask this question. Yesterday alone, I had 2 tastings.
Wow.
One I drove up to Brunswick to meet the bride halfway.
Okay.
And the other one I had at my home. Because I'm not an all-week-long bakery, I don't have cakes sitting in the fridge. Mm-hmm. So I have to make everything fresh for tasting. But I will do that. And so yesterday what I did is I made up 2 flavors of cake and I made up 5 flavors of frosting.
Oh, wow.
With various combinations.
And they take the frosting and put it on the cake, and is that how you try to, go through that detail a little bit?
I've done it a variety of different ways. I've done cupcakes. I've also done little pieces where I just decorate a dollop of frosting on there. What I did yesterday is I made a 2-layered cake, almost 2 inches. I cut it 1 3/4 inches to give them the idea of how big the piece would be on the plate.
Okay.
And explained it was a little shy. And I frosted it, and so it looked like a cut piece that would be served to their guest.
Nice, nice. And how long do normally do the tastings take?
If we've already nailed down some specifics on the design of the cake, it doesn't take long. It's usually maybe an hour.
Okay. So you do a full consultation on design, flavor, and things of that nature.
Yes.
And delivery time, I'm assuming. Do you do Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, Instagram? Do you do all of those things?
I actually love Facebook. It's got my best outreach with people. I can direct them to it. I do have another website as well, but I don't update that one at all. I've really leaned towards Facebook. I don't have Twitter. I don't have any other medium.
So you use Facebook for
Facebook
most of all of your
exclusively,
stuff. So
yes.
check that out. So like her on Facebook when you get a moment after seeing the show first. How many flavors do you carry personally in your arsenal of wedding cake tasting stuff?
I can make any flavor that the bride requests for the most part, but when I offer flavors for cakes, my specialty is carrot cake. I have an award-winning carrot cake recipe, and that one is by far my most favorite. I also have a Pina Colada recipe that I do, but I can do anything. I don't have a list of any specific flavor, so when a bride comes to me and asks, well, what flavor can we do? I throw a few suggestions out there, and I try to see what they're looking for if they've tried something in the past.
Pretty much the sky's the limit, whatever they want to
Yeah.
do. That's nice. So that you don't basically hold them to one thing. They can come up with anything, and you'll say, yes, I can do it, or I'm going to do it.
Absolutely. There was one bride that I worked with, and we did 3 alcoholic layers.
Wow.
And it was only adults going to the wedding. The top layer was a Bailey's Irish cream cake.
Wow.
The middle layer was a rum cake, and the bottom layer was a pina colada cake.
Which is interesting when you say that because I'm Cuban, and all of our birthday cakes growing up, I never realized that they were Italian rum cakes. So we always gave Italian rum cakes as birthday, cakes at everybody's house. So the first time I took my partner to a birthday party, and it was a kid's birthday party, it was Italian rum cake. He said, there's rum in this cake. I said, well, yeah, it's an Italian rum cake. That's what we bring. So really interesting, but I'm going back 40 some years ago. So now you know my age. Do you ever do, which is interesting because I've told clients this, when you're doing events and you want a big cake, obviously the huge 10-tier cakes, they're not all real, because if not, after 5 hours of being under the light, and it would tip over. So do you do fake cakes and then have the cake in the back so that it's cut, so sort of creating the magic of the wedding? Do you do things like that?
I love doing it that way, but especially if a bride is on a budget. I worked with one bride in particular, and I believe we're going to end up showing the cake, and I'll let you know when we get it.
Okay.
She was getting married, and her husband really wanted cupcakes. And she was just going to get a small 6 and 8 inch tier, and she had the most beautiful dress. I said, you really need a bigger cake than that. And she, so I did, the bottom 3 layers were dummies, and the top layer was the real cake that they fed each other, and then the guests had cupcakes.
And nobody was the wiser because you whisk it away after it's cut, and everybody thinks you're cutting it in the back, and you're just cutting the sheet cake, which is actually really an interesting way of doing it. I'll tell you a little tidbit. In Philadelphia, when most of my career was in Philadelphia, I had a client, and she was really procrastinating on the design of the wedding cake, and we had an in-house baker. And so one day I got home, and she had left me 3 photos of a wedding cake that she liked, and she said, you pick, I can't. And so she put the whole thing on me, and so I was like, oh my God, that's a lot of pressure. And it's something that, when you think about it, your wedding cake sits there from cocktail hour through dinner, after dinner. So it's on display for almost 2.5 hours. So you want it to be beautiful, and because it takes center stage half the time. So what I did was I took the 3 photos that she had given me, and I took a piece of each photo, and I had the baker design from all 3 photos, and the cake came out beautiful.
And then it's your own original
exactly,
design.
and it's not one cake. What I did was I picked the most important parts of each of the cakes that she did like, and I just brought it together into one cake. And so that's an interesting way sometimes to do it. And I've told people this too, I don't know if you've ever shared this, that when you are having a hard time picking a cake style or a look, take 3 that you really like, flip them over, spin them around, turn it over, and there's your wedding cake. Pretty simple. And so it saves a lot of drama, I think. I don't know how you feel about that, but it's, sort of, if you know 3 looks that you're going to do, then, don't stress out. Put it, say, come to you, Linda. Hey, Linda, can you help me with this? And you're going to be the expert. And you're going to know how to put those 3 components together. I don't know if you feel that same way.
Absolutely. What I will do with a bride when she calls and doesn't know what she wants, I tell her, Google whatever color your wedding's going to be. Google pink wedding cakes. If you're going to be focusing on a Western theme, Google Western wedding cakes, and Google all of the different components that you're going to have in your wedding, and then start sending me pictures of things that you like on those cakes, and tell me what you like about that cake, what you like about this other one, and then we can make it your own very unique cake.
Perfect. Same
Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
That's a great idea. What's your take on fondant?
I love fondant.
There's some people that like it and people that don't. And tell me why you like it.
I like it because it makes the cake so pristine, and it gives you that nice clean look, and it gives you something that you can work with and really make look amazing. And if the cake underneath it is delicious, and if you put enough frosting, it doesn't matter. The guests can peel it off.
Yep. That's what I tell them too. That's an interesting thing because you don't necessarily have to eat the fondant. You can, as long as the cake is wonderful inside, who cares? It looked beautiful while it was on display. And which brings us to buttercream and how long buttercream should actually sit out. I mean, especially if you're at locations like Wolf Neck Farm where you're outside, in the summer, and you're not inside, you're in a tent, you're on a bluff with mosquitoes. What's the reality of that's where you should use fondant as opposed to buttercream, correct? Am I wrong in thinking that, or?
I would definitely advise if you're not going to be in an air-conditioned environment in the middle of summer, the frosting could fall off the cake. I can put the buttercream frosting inside the cake, and as long as it gets put out just shortly before the event starts, it should be able to maintain its integrity. But you don't want to have buttercream frosting in the heat.
Especially with no air conditioning or having refrigeration, because when you're at Wolf's Neck Farm, I'm just using that as for instance, there is no refrigeration. You are literally no running water. You're in a field. So when would you deliver it? So say if the wedding was at 4 o'clock, when would you deliver the wedding cake to a location like that so that the cake, 2.5 hours later will taste good? So that's a hard question.
I don't like it when these situations happen because you just know something could go wrong. I would not get it there any more than an hour ideally, no more than an hour before, but 30 minutes.
If the wedding's at 4, then you bring it in at 3. And
Yeah.
so basically it's sitting an hour and a half to 2 hours before it gets cut. So I think that's a safe bet to do that. So just keep that in mind. It's just those little things when you're thinking about locations and where to put your wedding cake. And if you wanted to add anything onto that.
I had a bride who she had her wedding in a tent and it was pouring rain. And I used isomalt to make dragonflies, which you can look on my Facebook page and see the dragonfly cake. But the dragonflies started to melt because of the rain. So if you're in extreme weather conditions,
that'll happen.
I don't know a lot that really would not be affected. Fondant's probably your safest bet.
Yeah. That's what I've always told my clients too. What's your typical delivery time for a wedding? So I know we covered it on buttercream versus fondant. But if, say, again, is it always an hour, or do you, like, say, if you're going into Portland, or say, and how far do you travel? I mean, that's also plays a part in your delivery time of the wedding cake.
Absolutely. I wouldn't want to get there any more than an hour before any later than an hour before the wedding. Up to an hour before the wedding starts, depending on the venue, depending on circumstances. If I can get in earlier and it's air conditioned, I would rather get it there earlier. I take each situation on a case-by-case basis, and I will deliver cake anywhere as long as,
you get
paid for the delivery.
And I see that we've popped up some photos here, and this is a great cake that's up on the screen right now you want to explain this one a little bit here?
That is my friend Becky's wedding cake that I made as her present. She sings and her husband plays guitar. So we came up with the idea of doing the Marshall amplifier.
Cool.
And so it's a sculpted cake. It is real cake. And I brought that down. It was the hit of the wedding.
Nice. A lot of detail on that. I know they're going to be flipping some extra ones on here as well. You call this one your bling cake, I think,
yes.
when we first were talking about it.
Yes, and this is a great example of dummy cakes
And
being incorporated with real cake. The bottom 3 tiers of this cake are styrofoam dummy cakes, and the top layer is the real cake that the bride and groom fed to each other. And if you go on my Facebook page, you can actually see the
it.
bride with it.
Wow. So that's great on that. So more pop-up we'll be able to see. And then I love the detail here with the pearl, and you make, those are, I'm going to say, you've made the design, the floral with icing, I'm assuming. Is that what that is?
The rose?
The rose?
The rose is made out of gum paste, actually.
Gum paste, okay.
Yes.
And this is your sushi cake.
Yep, the sushi is made out of Rice Krispies.
Nice.
And I individually formed all the vegetables on the inside and dusted them with powder to try to make it as realistic as possible.
Oh, that's really cool.
If you look close, you can see the green around the white in the center of the sushi.
Very clever, very clever.
And that's buttercream, by the way.
Nice. And then here's a square versus round, rounds versus square.
And that's stenciling, which is a really great technique. It can really dress up a cake.
Fresh
and
flowers at the top?
Those are fresh flowers. The bride provided the flowers. And there weren't enough when I got there.
And then these are cupcakes too.
Yes, these are cupcakes. I hand painted the elements like around the flowers. I painted
Someone's
the golden.
turning 50.
Yes, and I, with the exception of the 50s, I hand formed all of those, and I swore I would never do those cupcakes again without making a mold
Wow.
for each of those.
Interesting. And Cupcake Tower, those are becoming very popular again.
That was a
here.
very small wedding, but I think there were only 25 cupcakes.
Oh, nice. And a top for them to actually do their photo and to cut and everything.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Pina Colada.
These are my award-winning Pina Colada cupcakes.
They look good.
That is a mascarpone center, and it was very delicious.
Very good. It looks delicious. It really does.
And my friend wanted to do cupcakes for her wedding, so it was winter, and she really wanted to do a snowflake theme. You can't really see, but some of the cupcakes have snowflakes on them. Some of them have berries, and some of them have
And that's in
silver
Scarborough because that's the camp.
Yes, it is,
Yeah.
Camp Ketchup.
Yep. Yeah, I can tell by the brick, the stone fireplace and the yellow wall there. And baby showers, I'm assuming a little girl.
That is very good guess. I thought that one was a fun cake.
Cute. And the Beatles, that's a great cake. Look at the shadow on that.
I airbrushed that.
Really?
And I hand carved those silhouettes.
That's really cute. Look
and
at
hand
that.
carved the letters.
I missed that when you showed it to me. I missed the shadows on there.
Yeah,
Very
that's the Abbey
interesting.
Road album. If you
Yeah.
don't know the Beatles.
Yeah. Very cool.
And
Wow. There you go, Kiss. So
that tongue is 3-dimensional. If you were to like look at it straight, I made the tongue actually come out
Wow.
and be realistic. And it's hard to see, but
should
the
have sent
hair
one
is
to Gene
actual real
Simmons.
hair too.
Is it Gene Simmons? That's
Yes.
the guy from Kiss. So there you go. You should have sent it to him.
I actually did.
Did you really?
I
Oh
posted
wow.
it on his Facebook
Nice.
page or Twitter or whatever.
And back to that cake. That's great. How long should a client book you after they've booked everything else? So after the wedding dress and the venue and the caterer and music, when do you normally get the call from the client?
That has varied. I've had a 2-week notice from people who weren't planning.
Wow.
And then I've also got people who have already booked me into September of this year. Some brides are just really on top of everything and want to nail down the details. I'm going to be the easiest part of the planning
Yep.
for the most part. It's to me, it's the most fun part
Yep.
because it's creative. But ideally, you're going to save your date with me as soon as you know the date if you want me to do your cake, because you don't want me to
And then you
take
put in
on
a
someone else.
deposit and stuff like that. And all
Yes,
that
I do
stuff.
ask for a deposit to hold it, and it is, my contract will have it be refundable in stages up until a certain point.
Perfect. That's good to know. And I know that we talked about this, about clients bringing you photos so that you can duplicate the wedding. Is that something that they do once they book you or during the tasting? Like if at a tasting, I'm assuming they're still narrowing down who they're going to pick. But once they book you, do they bring in all the stuff that say, okay, Linda, you're our cake lady. Here's everything we want you to do. Is that how that happens?
Well, a lot of it's actually done through emails when I have
Okay.
them find those pictures and send it to me, and we communicate back and forth through email or chat if, through my Facebook page. Or we'll talk on the phone. A lot of it gets done ahead of time so that when we have the tasting, we're just pretty much nailing down the final details. But I don't have a set way that it has to be done. Whatever works for the bride is how
How it
it's
works for you.
best. Yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. Do you do other things other than the wedding cakes? And I know we touched on all of this, like graduation, but is there something that you just go, this is too cool? I know that with the Beatles cake and the cake that we just saw that had the amplifier and the guitar, and those are really cool, but is there one that sticks out in your mind that goes, this is the cake that I'm going, ah!
I actually am doing a baby shower cake, and it's going to be 3-tiered because this is what she wants. And it's going to be a fun design.
Oh, wow.
It's going to be so fun. It's going to have leopard print on the bottom. There's going to be swags. And then it's going to be plain on top. And I'm making a little princess crown to go on the top.
Oh, that's cute.
I'm really excited about that one. I have a few really fun wedding cakes coming up as well. I'm really invested in the whole design aspect of it. So you'll have to watch the Facebook page, but one of them is about dragons.
Tell us about your awards, because I know you've won a couple of things. So I want to know about that, and I'm sure everybody wants to hear about that. So tell us about those.
Sure, I love competing. I'm very competitive, but it's also, competing is a great way to hone your skills because you really do your best work when you're putting it together for competition. So I entered the Connecticut Cake Competition 3 times. The first year I entered, I took first place, got my blue ribbon. Second year I entered, I got the first place and the trophy. And both of those times I entered with friends. It was a team competition. My friend Julie, the first one, and my friend Maggie, who's local. She's extremely talented. She worked with me on the second one.
Oh, wow.
And then the third one I did by myself, and I took second place. All of those, once again, are in the competition folder on my
nice.
Facebook page. And then I did, this was the most exciting, I did a live competition where there were 3 teams, and we had 4 hours to decorate a cake for 500 people. We could go in there with the cakes all baked, and they gave us 1 hour to stack it and crumb coat it. And my friend and I worked really hard for 4 hours.
Wow.
And we won.
Wow.
It was a very emotional, exciting time for me. I was very, very happy. This jacket's from that competition.
Nice, nice. Congratulations on those. And how? Here's something that I always find interesting. And how high should a wedding cake actually be? Is there a sort of rule, or is I've seen cakes that have gone ridiculously high that you need a ladder, and who's going to move that cake, and so.
The higher you go, the riskier it is. I think that a cake should be what a bride wants. Bottom line, if she wants a high cake, one that's taller than whatever, then...
As long as you explain, hey, this could fall, it could tilt, there's all these variables that could happen.
But there's also, if you know you're going to have a high cake, my construction of that cake is going to be a lot different. I'm not just going to use dowels.
Got it.
I'm going to be using probably PVC pipe up the middle and incorporating that in so that there's no way that cake's going to tip over. There are things that we can do structurally
That can hold it in
underneath
place.
that will compensate for that high cake.
I remember, I'm going back almost, I think it was 99, 2000, around there, those real interesting wedding cakes that were coming out of Italy, which were, the stands were different heights, and they didn't all connect, and so you pieced your cake together that way, and that was an old way of doing it. I haven't seen that come back. Thank God.
I don't like that. I don't like pillars anymore
Yeah,
either.
I just sort of, that style's not my favorite. It's it's very dated, and you want something that's fun, and some people might like that and not putting it down, but there are so many beautiful designs out there that go for it. So as always, I hope this was helpful to everybody. I thank Linda for being here. I tune in next week, and as always, thank you for joining. Thank you, Linda, for coming.
Thank you, Fausto.